I grew up hearing stories about Alex, evil spirits that supposedly inhabit old trees, as a kid. It was enough to make me never want to go camping, and even now, decades later, I still avoid tents and sleeping bags. But that doesn't mean everyone shares my fear. In fact, when my son Riley started asking for a tent for his birthday, I had to get over my trepidation and help him pick one out. It wasn't cheap, but we finally found one with just enough room for him and his two best friends to sleep in comfortably. And of course, I told them all about Alex and how they lure unsuspecting campers into their homes by shaking the branches of the trees to make the tent collapse. They didn't believe me, of course, until a week later when we went camping. I told them, please don't go in the tent if the branches start moving. But they did. And now I have to tell their story. My wife and I decided to pitch the tent at a familiar campground near some friends of ours who also loved to camp. We arrived late, so we didn't do much exploring. We quickly set up the tent and made a fire while the boys excitedly ran round the perimeter. Soon it was time for bed. So we tucked them in and told them stories and jokes until their eyes grew droopy. Then, just as I was drifting off myself, I heard a noise that made me sit up. It was a low rumble, like the sound you hear right before thunder. Then the branches of a nearby tree began to shake violently. My wife and I looked at each other in alarm and started shouting for the kids to get out of the tent. But they didn't seem to hear us. As the rumbling grew louder, the tent began to shake, and I couldn't help myself. I ran over and started pounding on the tent, screaming at the top of my lungs for them to come out. Finally, they emerged, stumbling and confused. What's wrong?" Riley asked, rubbing his eyes. "Come on, guys," I said, helping them out of the tent. "Let's get away from here." They protested, of course, but I insisted, and we quickly packed up our things and got in the car. Once we were far enough away, I finally allowed myself to relax and breathe normally again. My wife and I exchanged grateful glances and then turned to the boys in the back seat. So Riley finally said, breaking the silence, "Was that an Alex?" I decided not to upset him by telling him that I didn't know what it was, because no matter what, he wouldn't have believed me. So I simply replied, "Maybe," and then changed the subject. But Riley was still curious. "Do you think it wanted us to come out of the tent?" he asked. "I don't know," I said vaguely, hoping he would give up. But he didn't. He kept asking questions, which eventually led to an argument. And my wife and I were starting to get irritated. So we told them all that they had to sleep in the car from then on. Of course, they weren't happy about it, but they didn't argue. And the next night, as we were driving, they fell asleep easily, which made us feel a little guilty. We woke them up just before sunrise so they could stretch their legs and get some fresh air. And when I asked them if they wanted to go camping again, they both enthusiastically said yes. I suppose that's where I should have drawn the line. But we were already committed, so I didn't. And the next night we returned to the same campsite. We set up the tent again and settled in for the night. And just as I began to doze off, I heard that same low rumble. The boys were asleep, so my wife and I just watched in horror as the branches of the tree began to shake. This time, though, instead of collapsing the tent, the branches reached out and began pulling the tent apart, ripping it to shreds. My wife and I screamed for the kids, but it was too late. They were gone. We don't know what happened to them. The police have been no help, and my calls to our friends have gone straight to voicemail. It's like they vanished into thin air. I don't want to be too dramatic, but I honestly believe that it is because of me that my son and his two friends are dead. Or maybe it was the Alex. Maybe it was the Alex.